This is a Fox News weather alert. Hurricane Irma, the strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic, currently wreaking havoc in the Caribbean, with the storm forecasted to hit the United States mainland in the coming days. We're monitoring the storm and we'll have a full update later in the hour. Now for our top story. Yesterday, we told you about President Trump's announcement that he's ending President Obama's controversial DACA program, which helped illegal immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. Although even many liberal legal analysts agree DACA is on shaky legal authority, the media is attacking President Trump as heartless and motivated by an animus towards Latinos.
The president's decision to end DACA was heartless and it was brainless. If this order stands, hundreds of thousands of families will be ripped apart.
This is one of the most cruel acts we've seen in the presidency in a long time. And the President Obama and President Trump not only disagree on policies, they disagree on values.
It's hard for me to see the big picture from a Republican point of view, Joe, going forward and just giving the back of your hand to people who have Hispanic surnames.
This whole gaslighting that's come to so many issues, especially racial issues in this country, it's so obvious. It's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's just flat out bias, flat-out discrimination that they're touting coming from this White House.
So this is racist. Repealing Obamacare was racist. The travel ban was racist. Even Trump's speech in Poland was racist, Greg. When they don't have a policy argument to make, it's the racial attack. Is that right?
It's the most overused quiver that they have. You know, all Trump did is he made it legal. He put a ring on it. And think about it. I mean, think about it. He put it in the right place. It was in the wrong place. You know how delicious cookies are? I love cookies.
I remember them.
But I don't have the cookie jar in the bathroom next to the toilet. I keep it in the kitchen. What he did was he took something that should be in the Congress. He moved it into the right place. That's all he did. He made the public part of the decision, which is what should have been done. And both sides actually agreed that this is where it should be. He transferred the decision, not the dreamer. The dreamers are going to stay where they are. It's where the decision is going. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of when Reagan announced the registering of the draft. I think I was I don't know what year I was, in high school or something, and everybody got angry. Oh, my God, he's Hitler. He's terrible. But it was necessary, and it didn't change a thing. It was just something that he felt he had to do because it was the legal right thing to do, but it didn't change a thing. If the media actually reported the story, they'd have nothing.
So the president is heartless and racist for following the Constitution. That is what the left is arguing.
Right. Well, and remember, my theory is that racism is greater than Russia. So that if they have a chance to say that a Republican is racist, they will take it almost every time. So this is something that Republicans deal with a lot. I do think that there's something to be said that if President Trump had just waited 3 weeks when one of the courts was going to strike this down, then he could have said, oh, okay, well, I guess we can't defend it. Then asked the Congress to do it, then he probably wouldn't have had to deal with all of this. But remember, this pleased his base for a day, and then by the end of the night, everybody on that TV that you just saw that was complaining, actually, the president agrees with you. He said he wants DACA to get done. He wants to sign it into law. And if it's not, that's okay, because he'll revisit it then, because nobody has to worry about anything. So I don't understand why the right isn't more mad.
Right, because it seems like the left is angry when, in fact, the president agrees with many people on the left that the dreamers should be protected and they should find some sort of legal status permanently.
And that's the point, was the executive order didn't codify their immigration status. It really didn't. It wasn't a long-term, stable form of protection. And as Greg pointed out at the beginning of the show last night, that's what made the whole thing so cruel. And it's very interesting because, Dana, you're absolutely right about race in the Republican Party, because any chance that opponents get, they will pin the racist tail on the elephant. And that's why there were so many Republicans who came out and so strongly admonished the president for his careless comments after Charlottesville, because it's such a sensitive issue, particularly a lot of the lawmakers from the South, for whom it is an ongoing issue from their childhood and you know, their ancestry. But having said that, the president wants DACA to pass. And I think that shows that we do have some complex issues in immigration. A lot of people want the wall. Most people, vast majority of people, want the Dreamers to be able to stay here if they were brought here against their will, and all they know is a great American life for a majority of them.
Juan, I'm going to hit you with a theoretical argument about illegal immigration, and just tell me if you think I'm wrong here.
Okay.
So if you're a white guy and you live in Texas, and you cross the border into Mexico illegally, and you go down there for a few years, and you're working cash jobs, and you're driving without insurance, and you're not paying any taxes and things like that, then the Mexican authorities catch you, and they send you back to the United States. Is that mean and cruel and racist against white people, or is that just Mexico following the law?
I think it's Mexico following the law.
So why, when the United States does that to Mexicans, it's racist and cruel?
I love these because it's such false analogies.
It was a perfect analogy.
You worked on it all day.
Oh, man. All right.
I give it a 9 point. The Russian judge gives a 9.7 on the analogy.
Yeah, the analogy.
It's a Russian judge, though, so we're going to have to look into you.
I like
the analogy is a total setup. I mean, the whole issue
back to the U.S. without harm.
The whole issue, though, is I think, that you have a president who I think is very vulnerable to charges about racial bias, given what happened after Charlottesville, given what happened, as we've discussed with Sheriff Arpaio. And now the idea that you have, I think it's 15 states and District of Columbia filing a lawsuit saying that because 78% of these young people are Mexican, it's evidence of the president's ongoing displeasure with Mexicans. I mean, he's the one who's talked about murderers and thieves. He's the one who said the judge, who was of Mexican heritage, could not be a fair arbiter in his case. So he has some history here that loads the deck. I don't know that it applies to every Republican, but I think in this case, people are saying, hey, what's with Trump and these Mexicans? Why does he have this kind of hard edge to him? People say, well, what is it really speaks to his base. Today you had Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, who's apparently well plugged in, saying, he really didn't want to do it, but guess what? Stephen Miller, and who used to work for Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, and was an ally to Steve Bannon.
The author of the famous phrase, cosmopolitan bias.
There you go. That he wanted this, that he saw this as pleasing the Trump base, that you don't even have to do any winks and nods. You just do this, and they say, yeah, you go get them. But the fact is that if it's about jobs, it's about the economy, well, goodness gracious, most corporate executives in the country are saying, leave this alone. You have people saying, you know what, most of these kids contribute to the local economy. They're good kids, and yet, I don't know, President Trump
So now Democrats are siding with big business. I like that, Juan. Is there any risk to the Democrats making so much fuss about the plight of illegal immigrants and not really fighting for American jobs? You've talked about identity
I think it costs them elections. Now, they don't realize that because the media is always on their side. So they think that they have this false sense of belief. They are living in a bubble. As Scott Adams would say, they're living in a different movie, so they don't see how they lost. And meanwhile, what you're having is you have a President Obama who rewarded people that were coming to America, but not people who were in America. And what Donald Trump leapt on was, like he said, all America. It's not just about them, it's about all of us. That was a winning vision. To your point, I'm always troubled by the thing about the judge. Like he said, the judge was a Mexican, so he can't. But do you know who does that? Lawyers do that when they're picking a jury. Yeah. When they're picking men and women and blacks and whites and Hispanics. That's what he was doing what every single lawyer does. He looked at the judge, goes, Judge, I'm Mexican. He might not like me. That's what lawyers do. Lawyers do that, and he just did it, and yet somehow it's wrong. So people grab these little instances and they go, oh, he said this, he said this, he said this. But when you actually focus on them, they turn out to be light as air, puff away.
That's an interesting point because President Obama nominated a wise Latina to the Supreme Court just because he wanted someone with that background.
Family background.
Exactly. I want to talk to Dana about a point you were just making about the base for President Trump. Rush Limbaugh had some things to say about that. Let's hear what he said.
What Trump did today via Sessions, it's almost along the same lines as pulling out of the Paris Accords. This is just, it's rocked them. They didn't think it would ever happen. Trump is not this callous. Trump is not this cold-hearted. But Trump knows his base. And he knows the impact all of this has had on the American economy and American jobs. And he's following through on one of his most predominant campaign commitments.
How would you assess that?
Well, all true. And then at 8:38 p.m. last night, which is after that show aired, President Trump tweeted that he's good with keeping DACA. So, like, in the morning, Jeff Sessions said it's hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost because of this, and we have to deal with something. We have to deal with it. And then, not 12 hours later, I guess that's moot, because he wants to have a legislative solution, which I'm for a legislative solution as well. I do think there's a possibility of this. Congress has been very close on comprehensive, or whatever you want to call it, immigration reform for many years, like over 10 years, probably 3 or 4 times. But the thing that's different now is that there's now a deadline.
Right.
So it's 6 months. Okay, so a deadline can focus the mind, and it is possible that you might figure out a way to do this. What I would have done if I were Schumer and Pelosi today, when the president agreed with them on the debt relief bill, I would have said, while we're at it, sir, we would propose a straight up or down vote on DACA on Friday. We got the votes. You say you want it. They say they want it. We've got the votes. How about a deal?
There are enough
They should have just done
Republicans
it.
who want that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Get it off the table.
Here's the thing about what Jeff Sessions said, and this is what I take issue with. Whenever there's a logical fallacy falling from a politician's lips, I'm always dubious. That, you know, he says that hundreds of thousands of jobs have been taken by these dreamers. And that's my problem. And liberals suffer from this mostly. It's a new strain within the Republican Party. And that's the idea that economics is a zero-sum game. We know it isn't. We know that you can actually create more wealth. You can create more jobs. You can create more opportunity in this country for everybody. You just have to let the economy go and get the government out of the way.
So the problem, wait,
Go
hold
ahead.
on. Let me just say one thing. First to Greg, it's illegal for a lawyer to make a selection, jury selection based on race. They can have exemptions where they don't have to explain it.
Right.
But it's illegal to say that because of someone's race, heritage, whatever. That's
But you
just not
know
true.
they do it.
That's just not true, Greg. The second thing to say here is that Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, oh, you know what? President Trump wants a total fix. He wants comprehensive immigration reform plus DACA. So basically then, he's sending it back to Congress and saying, oh, well, I guess the odds are against this happening, but I'm going to claim that, oh, it's a legitimate place to do it. So he creates anxiety, fear in this community of young people who have jobs, high percentage, almost 80% working, paying taxes, contributing to local economies. He puts them on edge. And nobody says, hey, you know what, why are you playing politics with this? And then muddling the whole issue of, is this comprehensive immigration reform or do you really want DACA?
Speaking
Not
of
clear.
playing politics, though, why won't Democrats admit that it was a horrible idea on the part of President Obama? If they would stand up and say, this was a bad idea in the first place that set up this situation.
Well, you know who said that? Dianne Feinstein said it last night, and we played it just in case anybody wants a refresher.